first of all, you have to move so fast, right? So if things are
Mhm.
working, you're usually like, okay, I got it. But what I've been trying to do lately, which I think is really working, is when I know I'm done, when I know I'm like, I have it, I will go again. And I
Yeah.
will go and sort of say, like, I hate using this, but I'll kind of say free choice. I'll kind of say, like, let's just get
Right.
another one. And so often that is the
Mhm.
best take. I also like never say anything like definitively. I'm not like, do it like
Mm.
this. I'm always like
Right.
figuring it out, genuinely figuring it out as I'm talking to them, like,
Right.
I don't know, what if, and then it's more like we're all having an organic, like, experience in the moment. But because I came from acting too, I am, like, very nurturing and, like, I just try to put myself into it with them as much as possible, I'm not, like, out here looking back in, and it's just kind of who I am. I don't really know how to do it any other way.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon is a podcast on directing for anybody that's, quite simply, ever watched anything. Visit PeteChatmon.com to get your official podcast merch, hoodies, hats, jackets, mugs, and other swag, and learn more about your host.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon is sponsored by the good folks at Scriptation. Scriptation is the Emmy Award-winning app for production that allows you to mark up scripts, transfer notes, generate breakdowns, and so much more. No matter where you fall on the call sheet, Scriptation makes it easy to go paperless, collaborate with your crew, and save hours of time. Go to scriptation.com/Pete to learn more and receive a special offer exclusive to Let's Shoot listeners. Now, on to the show. All right. Welcome to episode 73 of Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon. Today's guest is the multi-hyphenate creative force, Maggie Kiley. Maggie is a director that's also put significant time in front of the camera, getting her start at Broadway's Atlantic Theater Company before appearing in films like We Own the Night, Order of Chaos, and All Good Things. Behind the camera, Maggie has directed episodes of Dr. Odyssey, American Sports Story, Aaron Hernandez, Dr. Death, 911, as well as the pilot for Grosse Pointe Garden Society, which I'm in prep for right now. She did a hell of a job on that pilot, which premieres Sunday, February 23rd on NBC and will be streaming next day on Peacock TV. Now, the catch-up.
Catch-up.
I talk a lot about the stamina of directing. On a daily basis, it includes the mental stamina to maintain an extreme level of focus and flexibility over the course of a continuous 12-hour day. You've also got to be psychologically on your toes, figuring out how to navigate dozens of interpersonal relationships in a way to get what you want, give people what they want, and get yourself hired back for another episode. Plus, there's the lack of sleep and standing all day. Drink lots of water. Obviously, these are not complaints. It's all a part of the job. It's just a part of the job that I really want emerging directors to be considerate of, because it'll sneak up on you and get in the way of your creativity if you're caught slipping in any of these departments. To go further into the ins and outs of episodic television directing, I wanted to share an update of last week's personal calendar and what lies ahead for me this week. I'm recording this intro on Sunday, February 2nd, just so there's context. I wrapped episode 1315 of Chicago Fire last Wednesday, January 30th at 7 p.m. Returned to my apartment by 8 and got my things together for a 4 a.m. car pickup to Midway Airport. I took a 6 a.m. flight from Chicago to Atlanta, landed at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, picked up my rental car, and drove directly to the Grosse Pointe Garden Society production office, where we immediately hopped into a location scout, concept meeting, stage walk, and more. That meant that during the last week of shooting Chicago Fire, I had to read all 8 episodes that came before my episode, number 109, and break down my script so I could literally hit the ground running. I also got involved with casting, all while shooting another show. On Monday, February 3rd, I'll receive my editor's cut on Chicago Fire. make notes to share with my editor via email, and then I'll have Tuesday through Friday, February 7th, 4 days on a 1-hour show to work on and ultimately deliver my director's cut. All of this will be going on concurrently with about 10 more prep meetings on Grosse Pointe, a tech scout, production meeting, and the final buttoning up I'll need to do before we start shooting on Monday, February 10th. The last thing in this mix is getting to celebrate with my fellow directors at the DGA Awards in Los Angeles on February 8th. So I say all that to speak to the importance of refining your personal process so you can work quickly, efficiently, and maintain your creativity at the highest levels. It probably took me 15 to 20 episodes before I really landed on my workflow. And then after that, it's probably evolved 2 or 3 more times as I've gotten more experience and more confidence across 70 episodes of television. As you listen to this interview and all of the others we've done on this podcast, I hope you'll find little gems to add to your toolkit so you can be the storyteller we all need you to be. Now, without further ado, let's get to it. This is episode 73 of Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon, starring Maggie Kiley.
Roll sound.
Speed.
The interview. Take 1.
So this is a question that I don't often get to ask a director, but can you tell me about Terry Van Houten or Terry Van Houten? Does that name ring a bell to you?
Yes, that's so funny. I was just telling this story. That was one of the greatest names of a character I ever played as an actress, right? Law and Order SVU back in the day. I think that was my first last name credit where I had a first name and a last name. So that was when I was still acting. And I think I auditioned for the OG Law and Order like more times than anyone, for like the jogger running who came across a dead body in the park. But yeah, SVU was the first Law and Order that I actually booked, a 2-day like guest star on or whatever. And yeah, I had a great experience. I had to play like a mother who was in distress. So yeah.
Do you remember who directed that episode?
God, yes, Ted Bleckner, right?
Okay,
Is that
Ted
right?
Bleckner. I don't have that information. I could double check later, but you pulled that out pretty quick. I bet I feel positive in your certainty.
Yeah. I don't think he gave me a ton of direction, but I do remember the day a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we got to that point, like where are you from? What was your window into even thinking that the arts was a career path?
I grew up in Rochester in upstate New York, and we put on a production of Annie in the backyard when I was 9, and it really changed my life. We had all the neighbors came and sat on chairs, and I just loved performing, started out really young, started doing community theater, musical, singing, dancing, all of it. And my whole family kind of got on board with it. My sister was like a assistant director on some things I did. My dad built sets. My mom came and served snacks, and everybody was really encouraging. I didn't come up from an artistic family necessarily, but everybody really got into it. And I spent my whole, right up until my mid-30s totally focused on being an actor, from being in performing arts high school, and then I went to NYU for acting. So I really thought about it as an actor from a very early age, really only wanted to be acting.
I went to NYU as well, undergrad, and I don't know, I may be using the wrong terminology, but which department or school did you go to? Studio as an actor?
Studio. So I went to Atlantic, which I'm still a big part of that company today. That's David Mamet and Bill Macy sort of founded a theater company with a bunch of current NYU students in the 80s, I guess. And Atlantic has a school at NYU. There's Stella Adler, there's Cap 21, I think is still there. There's sort of different routes you can take. And it's kind of a funny story because when I auditioned for NYU, in the room, you had to choose your studio. And for some reason, I hadn't gotten the info ahead of time, so I hadn't prepared to choose.
Right.
And I had a really amazing acting teacher in high school who had us do a production of The Water Engine, which is one of David Mamet's like early, lesser known plays. And so when I saw the list of studios, I saw his name and I just chose that one randomly, which I'm sure you're never supposed to do in a moment like that. But it ended up being the perfect place for me because that's a studio that really focuses on a very specific technique of acting and a really thoughtful approach to like honoring the writer's intention, which I think later on really served me as a director.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna remember that and come back to that as we get to the more of the conversation around directing.
yeah.
But so after NYU, what was next for you when you graduated and kind of hit the so-called real world that most people I hear who have a film school experience, no matter the discipline, kind of say, I was not prepared for being a professional.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I remember when I first got to NYU and I was signing up for my classes, I really, really, truly believed I was going to be discovered on the streets of New York and like made famous within the first 3 months of living there. I don't know if I was just highly encouraged as a young person, but I really had a strong sense of, I guess you could say, entitlement when I got to New York, or just like a big dreamy idea of how my life was just going to suddenly like unfold in New York City and I'd be, on TV and then on screen. And I think at school I learned that I had to work really, really hard on my craft as an actor. And so I guess I'm thinking back, like, what did I do when I graduated? And I had an internship at a soap opera in a casting department. I was working in a restaurant. I was producing like short plays that I was hiring writers and acting in them. I was really hustling from a very young age to kind of keep creating space so I could keep working, because it really felt like no one was discovering me on the street.
Right.
No one like plucked me out of the crowd and said,
Right.
here's a TV show for you to star in. And I think I even got my real estate license, when I was 18. I went to like weekend real estate school, which it actually was a thing at the Pennsylvania Hotel, and figured out a way to like lease people apartments,
Right.
in between, just to like keep, income happening.
I that makes me laugh now because I'm thinking about Grosse Pointe Garden Society and
Oh, yeah.
the fact that you've got characters who are realtors, and it's an important
Yeah.
storyline in that pilot.
Yeah.
So it all comes
Yeah.
full circle. So
It does.
so it sounds like, you had this young kind of artistic entrepreneurial spirit to do Annie in the backyard. And then even with big dreams, when the real world kind of smacks you, you still were able to return to that kind of approach, which is create your own thing or try and put yourself in as many positions to be discovered, so to speak. What
Yeah.
was the first thing? Was Terry Van Houten the first thing where you were like, oh, I'm working? Or was there another time?
No. Yeah, I mean, I got my SAG card in the remake of Rear Window with Christopher Reeve, which was an ABC like MOW movie of the week, which I don't know if they even have those anymore. And that I didn't have a name. I was Professional Woman, which is why Terry Van Houten was such an accomplishment. But I was working at a restaurant on the Upper West Side of New York, hostessing. And I remember when I got cast in that, it was like a 2-week job, but I quit my restaurant job because I was like, I got it. I got a gig. I'm joining SAG. I mean, I guess it's like the more I talk about it, it sounded sounds like I was really kind of checked out. But I really just believed that, it was just a matter of time before more of it started happening. And, I definitely pieced it together from that. I did other small parts and things. I definitely did commercials. I did a lot of like small indie films that were not paying a lot of money, but, I was continuing to work. I
Right.
did that thing that all New York artists could do back then, which was I kept like a really low overhead. I had like a railroad apartment in Hell's Kitchen that was rent stabilized and had roommates and just kind of did what I needed to do.
That life doesn't even exist anymore. Like I don't like exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like you could be a waiter or a waitress, you could be an artist, and you could, you know, different months require different hustle adaptations, but you
Yeah.
could live and you could eat and you could have
Yeah.
fun and hang out and have a life. And now it's
Yeah.
like, I'm actually staying in Hell's Kitchen right now, ironically, and all I see are, 20 new skyscrapers that weren't here when I was here, 7, 8
Unbelievable.
years ago, a Starbucks on every corner. So,
I know.
so
I know. It's changed.
yeah. Now, when did you, okay, so, IMDb is just bullet points. It doesn't do the justice of the narrative, but I see your first director credit according to the IMDb in 2016 for a show called Guidance. Was that your first time in the director's chair for at least for episodic?
For episodic, yeah. So I actually started in film, making short film, and then I made 3 features, and then really had a hard time, getting into directing television, which is where I really wanted to be because I had young children at the time, and I just saw so much was happening in TV. But Guidance was a show on Awesomeness TV, and it was really short form. I think the episodes were like 10 minutes, but
Mhm.
that's how I got in the guild, was through that job. Right after that, I did my first episode for Ryan Murphy, which was Scream Queen, which was that fall, which was kind of right after that. So, yeah, that was my first time. Guidance still felt like an indie. It was a teeny budget. It was like really short days. That to me still really felt like an indie space, even though it did get me into the DGA. Scream Queens was like, at Paramount. Like
Right,
I had Brooke
right,
Shields was like my guest
mm,
star. I had Emma Roberts and Jamie Lee Curtis and
wow,
all the toys and all of
right.
it right there. That felt like a major step forward, but I also felt really ready for it, which sometimes you have to wait longer, but then you're better positioned.
What made you feel ready? Because I feel like there's a level of posturing, fake it till you make it that, you know, some directors employ, in the early parts of their career just to make it through their day intact.
Yeah.
And, I know you brought a really well attuned muscle as an actor, like to the job. So I'm sure that probably gives great confidence too. But like, what made you feel ready after the show for awesomeness that you were ready to kind of do something for Ryan Murphy and with all the kind of accoutrements of a bigger production.
It's so God, that's the fake it till you make it. I'm still faking it. No, I mean, I'll still start a job and there'll be some sequence or some piece of action or some piece of some rig or something that I've never done before. I have no idea how to do that. I have to just figure out how to do. But, I was coming up at a time where it was still really, really hard to break into TV. I mean, I know it's still hard, but I had done a lot of the programs that I think there was like a movement in 2016 around then where all of a sudden all the studios had to have some sort of diversity and inclusion program. And I was fortunate to like get into a lot of them, but a lot of them
Yeah.
were, in my opinion, just sort of, they were like, we're doing it, but they weren't
Yeah.
necessarily translating to jobs for people. So I
Yeah.
did a lot of those that did provide like shadowing opportunities, or like showrunners coming in and talking to us, or a working director coming in and talking to us. And I really found that I had to pay really close attention all the time to everything I was hearing. And I shadowed, you know, Daisy Mayer, and God, so many people, God, Jason Wolliner, and
Hmm.
Brad Beaker, who was my big mentor at Ryan Murphy TV, and he really brought me into his process. You know, he talked to me about how he prepped for things. He showed me all his documents. He would quiz me on the day, and I think that was for me a really big part of it. And that by the time I got to Screen Queen, I had been in that Ryan Murphy program and I'd been around, so it felt like everyone was standing there wanting me to succeed, which isn't always
Right.
the case on your first episode. But I think that
Right.
having, even today, I talk about it, the difference between the showrunners who I work for, who I really feel like they're putting their faith in me, you know, like they know I'm going to do a good job, and then I do a better job because I've been given, I'm like empowered to like go out and
Right.
make decisions and be creative. And those situations, I'm sure you've been in this before too, where feels like you're being sort of micromanaged, or everyone's
Yeah.
questioning everything you're doing. It's so much
Yeah.
harder in those environments to really soar, you know? And then my ego
It's
gets in
also
the way. Yeah.
um, those environments too. They kind of require you. Well, I mean, let me not speak for all. I feel like the challenge is often like not turning part of yourself off. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Because when you start realizing like you don't fucking care, like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You take great
It's
care
true.
to like think about like let me block this a little bit more interestingly, or what's kind of happened vaguely specifically on shows that I've done is like, you know, for whether it's for page count or for not really knowing what they want, it'll just be like people are in a room. I
Hmm.
read people in a room. I can't shoot people are in a room. I have to come up with like something for them to actually do. And then
Yeah.
you block it. And then it's like, well, why are they walking from over there? And it's like, well, what do you want them to do? Just
Right.
wait for
Sit.
someone to arrive and begin talking. And then so like as you get that a couple times, it's tough to be like, why not just put everybody on the couch? You know, if that's what we're
Yeah.
doing. And you have to like kind of remember not to fall into that kind of knee-jerk response, because somewhere something that you're thinking and pitching is going to land and work
Hmm.
and may just elevate a scene. And I had a specific conversation about something like this with a writer who told me like that the showrunners I did a shot and they were like, in the beginning, they're like, I can't cut out of this. Like related to
That's
me.
what
I was
I
like,
was
oh
gonna
shit.
say. They
You
sometimes
you
they'll put
know,
people at a table or put people on a couch to protect in the
yeah,
cut, right? Like
yeah,
knowing we might want to lift half of this scene, or but then
right.
it puts you in a box that's like not
But
fun to
then
play in.
the writer said though, like after like the third or fourth time of like watching it and reviewing it, they were like, "This is pretty cool." So that's like the
You have
part
to
that
do
like
it.
we're all bringing something to it, you know, and like there should be hopefully space for that opportunity to enhance and elevate.
Well, yeah, it's like, why are they bringing you to the table? That's like what I always come back to. Like, there are just certain types of shows I'm not as drawn to as a director, because I don't feel like there's a lot of room for a voice and a vision. So
Yeah,
I don't enjoy the process. I mean, I don't do a lot of shows like that, I guess, but I don't enjoy the process if I can't come up with something, or bring
yeah,
more of myself to it. So, yeah. And I guess to go back to the question of like being ready, and also the fake it till you make it. There was so much I didn't know when I first started in TV, even about like that the showrunner was the boss. Like, I know that that's I know that's true, but I sort of was coming from this like director is director. If you're on set and you're creating the environment that we're shooting in and you're positioning the camera, like you are in charge. So I think I had like more confidence and more authority going into it at the beginning
Mhm.
than maybe I should have, or I don't know. It all worked out fine, but I
It's the most
didn't know
delicate of
what I didn't
balances
know.
because your inclination was the proper inclination, but there's just the reality of like, you know, finding the skill to navigate the fact that like you come in and you've prepared this whole thing, but then you're gonna get notes along the way, and it's probably in your best interest to find a way to not necessarily just do them, but like
Mhm.
translate them into what you were looking to do. And hopefully what you're looking to do is in concert with the feel of the show. It's so many things that are happening at one time.
It
If you're
is.
doing a show that you don't get, you don't like, then your ideas probably aren't going to work, and somebody should fucking stop you because
Yeah.
you didn't watch the show. But it's tough.
But do you, like, get out in front of it a little bit more? Like, I
Mhm.
try, like, the show I'm doing right now, I've worked with this showrunner before. I've done a pilot for him before. So this I'm coming in to do a block, and he has, like, specific things he doesn't like in camera. Like, he doesn't like to feel the camera. He doesn't like to see the toys, is how he puts it. And, like, I know
Right.
what he means, but I also know that he does like some camera movement, but it's a very fine line of figuring it out. But, like, I brought in a jib to do a high angle shot, like, booming down on a table. And
Hmm.
early on, I knew that he didn't always love, again, toys. And I mean, a
Right.
jib is a tool. It's not a toy, but I knew what he meant. But I, like, went to him that day and I said, "Hey, just so you know, I designed something, I'm bringing a gym." And he was like, "Oh, no, it's great, it's fine," and he was fine, but I didn't he's not really the kind of showrunner who on set would be like, "Why is there a jib?"
Right.
But I also
Right.
knew he had said all of this to me kind of going into it, so I was trying so sometimes I'll try to, like, get out in front of it, which is, like, my way of saying I'm not really asking permission, but I guess I'm kind of, like, setting the
Hmm.
table a little bit for something that I want to do, and then I'm prepared to
Right.
sort of pitch them on it if I need to, like, convince them further.
I think that's brilliant because I guess the thing that I learned shadowing, one of the things that I took away was like, I I'm trying to do as much as I can so that when we do get to set, there aren't events that make it look like I don't know what I'm doing or I don't have
Mhm.
buy-in from the higher
Totally.
ups. And so like, like I had seen blocking, and then the showrunner comes down. I'm like, I don't really like the way that
Oof.
looks. You know what I mean? Like, or I've
Oof.
seen, sidebar conversations, and you're like, there's a disagreement about an approach here. So
Mm.
like you're talking about getting ahead and you know, whether it's approval, buy-in, mental emotional preparation for this
Yeah.
equipment you're gonna see. Like it's really, I think it's smart because then you avoid it during the process of the day.
Right. And also, like, what's important, like, it'll be scripted, like, she walks to the counter and guzzles a glass of water, but you know that, like, the design of that kitchen is shitty. You wanna be, like, down the
Yeah.
hall and keep her on the couch, and so I'll just say, like,
Yeah.
is it really important that it's way better for me if we can and most of the time, they're like, "Oh, no, it's fine." Like, somebody said to
Yeah.
me recently, they were like, "Oh, that's just for the read," and I was like, "Oh my god, this is the best quote. I have to remember this forever," that, like,
Right.
not every single thing sometimes it is just for the read, and then sometimes they'll be like, "Yes, she has to drink water in that moment," and then at least but it's hard to, like, get out in front of every single thing like that, but
Right. What's an example of, because I have an example, and I could go first or you could go first, but I was going to
no,
ask you,
go, you go first.
what's an example of a collaborative relationship where you really felt appreciated and it was a pivot from what was on the script, but they were like all in. So I'm thinking of this Interior Chinatown episode I did where, you know, they
Oh,
find
cool.
they find these matches, right, at someone's home, and then we cut to them. It's like a biker bar, right? And then we cut to two detectives going to that biker bar, and it's scripted that they're getting out of the car and walking up to the bar. And the episode it's got a bit of a True Detective feel. So there's a lot of stuff where we're either drones looking at the car, or we're
Mm,
over the car. I'm sorry, or we're like shooting through the windshield, right?
mm,
And so I was like, oh, well, what if instead of that, we, and it was like one line each, right? So I was like, well, what
yeah.
if we have the car driving through the, you know, dusty dirt of the biker bar. We line the bikes up on both sides of the car, and I shoot over to each of the actors. So you feel
Mm,
the threat of the biker bar that they're about to go to. And they were like, let's do it. But it meant more motorcycles. You
right,
know, it meant like,
right.
you know, a rig on that day when we were done with the
Yeah,
rig. You know what I mean? And it
yeah,
was just like but I felt like that's a kind of interesting visual way of like the impending threat of what they're about to walk
yeah,
into, if only
yeah,
for a quick beat. And
yeah.
I told him, I was like, this is really cool that you guys like were down for this, because a lot of times I wouldn't even pitch it, you know, because you can tell
But
it's
you're
not going to
also
be received.
yeah, but it's also like you're not pitching it just to like do something, like use a cool tool to make a I think the thing that
Right,
people are always still like resistant to is like, oh, they're just trying to do cool shots, right? Like if
right,
it sounds like, and I know your work and I know the filmmaker that you are, like you're talking about the page, right? You're like bringing it back to the storytelling, and you're like, here's a way
mhm,
to like take what's scripted and make it even more clear on screen by like designing it a little bit differently or bringing them into the environment a little differently. As you were talking, I was like, oh, what do I have? I did this Aaron Hernandez American Sports Story
great work.
recently,
I
which
just
was
finished watching that.
thank you.
Great work, great
Thank
work,
you.
great,
I'm
great
really
work.
proud of those my episodes were, like, ginormous. They were some of the biggest episodes I've ever directed, but I had a really big car sequence, which is, like it ends in basically a drive-by shooting, but it, like, starts in the club, and there was just, like, a lot of, pieces to this,
Security
iconic
camera stuff.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
just, like, a lot of but I remember that like, on the page, it wasn't a lot, and I remember we had all these conversations about how I wanted to shoot the driving, and we did a combination of the volume stage and car to
Oh, wow.
car, and then, there everyone it's so I mean, I'm sure you watch French Connection all the time for reference like I do, and I'm always like, there are no stunt drivers, there's no doubles, there's no"
Right,
because now it's like, "No, he can't no, but he can't be driving. Well, no, he can't be driving." It's like you can never have the camera on the actor, but I
right,
really wanted one piece of it to be real Josh driving, with the camera car, like, convening as he turned, and I just remember that those boards and the way we broke that out, it, like, came down to 3 days, and everyone kept saying,
wow.
"You really need to do it in 1 day," and I kept
Right,
saying, "We have to do it in 3 days." Like, it just because it was also that thing where you'd end up, like, even though volume work and green screen, even though we've all gotten really good at it, it still to me doesn't feel real. It's like
right,
I just knew I wanted one other piece to like bring into
right,
it, and it was a conversation we had multiple times with multiple layers of producers, and we did in the end up getting the full time, and I just think it was so worth it because that sequence is so dynamic and important,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. Yeah, because that's and if you have not watched the show is great. Like we came into it, my wife and I came into it a little bit late, so we were able to like catch up to like, maybe 6 of
Yeah.
them, and then we are like, oh, now we got to wait week to week.
Yeah.
But that sequence you're talking about it's the first one for him, right? It's like
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
people can watch the doc. It's the first
Yeah. It's his
murder,
first murder.
you
Yeah.
know, and to it 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 deserves the kind of proper treatment. There's an artifice that we've just kind of come to accept from the volume
Mm-hmm.
and stage
Mm-hmm.
work. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we've all agreed that like fast food's okay, but like, there's
Yeah.
also times when we want a home cooked meal. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like that. Like, I don't know if that I feel like I'm gibberishing, but it's like
No,
picking the
no, I
moment
know it.
where
Like
that
everyone's like, no, it looks good. Like it's better than it was, but it's still not the best, you know?
right,
So
right.
yeah. That show is another example too of that fake it till you make it, because I also in episode 5 had like huge NFL game sequences, but I had never directed. I had done a little bit of football in Dr. Death in like one scene where he's like in like a practice, but
Hmm.
this was like NFL game level, it was a series of events of iconic plays, and it just involved
Right.
like, lots of moving parts and lots of moving pieces, but and it was one of those things too where, and maybe this has happened to you, maybe it hasn't. I definitely had this thing in my career where certain sequences or certain kinds of shows, they'll make an assumption that like I'm not the right person for it because of my gender
Mm-hmm.
or because of like my experience or something. But I did feel with the football a little bit that everyone was like, and it was interesting to like meet that and like admit to the things I didn't know, like what a
Hmm.
slant was, or like, there were
Right,
certain like
right,
technical
right.
terms I didn't know, but like anything, you do the homework. And then what I kept going back to again and again was like, I'm a visual storyteller. Like I understand what's required of the game footage, but also we're not only recreating TV angles for this show, we're also telling
Right,
it's also his experience. And so how we're shooting his experience is what I've been doing all the other
right,
times on all my other
right.
jobs. So I can still do it. So, but I really didn't know anything about football. So
But
it's
there's a
kind of cool.
value in that though, in the sense of like, if you yeah, I have the most tangential things that come to mind when people talk, but there was a quote, Gabriel Muccini, who directed Pursuit of Happiness,
Hmm.
and he said, and I think he spoke like mostly Italian, so like I was reading about his interview for the job, and he said at the end of the interview that he felt didn't go well. He said, "Don't give this film to an American director because you guys have
Hmm.
forgot what it really means to go after. You forgot how much of an aspirational thing the American dream is." And as somebody who like would who sees it in a different light from the outside, like it really resonates with me in a very particular way. And I think like if you're doing something for the first time, like you're talking about, and you want to tell the story, you want to do it well, there's someone who's done it 10 times who's phoning it in. They're
Hmm.
going to like the last time they shot, a sports movie,
Yeah,
here's what I did,
exactly.
and I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it just like that. And that's not gonna that doesn't have an emotional resonance, the same level of someone who's like, I'm really trying to do something with this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that the whole season of Sports Story had incredible, like Carl Franklin and Paris Barclay came before me, and then
Hmm.
I was number 3 after the 2 of them, which was pretty incredible. And then Stephen Canals, who created Pose, like he came after me. And yeah, I mean, everybody brought like a really interesting perspective to it, I thought too, which was so cool to see.
So it sounds like, coming out of Scream Queens in 2016, you fell into the Ryan Murphy family.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great thing for me because as we all know getting your first episode is really hard. Getting your second is like equally hard. I find with so many of the people I mentor, and I did Scream Queens, and then I did a horror story. And
Mhm.
those shows are really hard. Like, those shows are not by the book in any way. They're very ambitious. The schedules are really challenging. They have
That's what I
really
hear.
complicated sequences. Yeah, you don't always get like a by the book prep, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
But yeah, I did a Scream Queens and a horror story and a 911. So three pretty ambitious big
Right.
shows right out of the gate. But it was great for me because having just, if you're talking about the IMDb of it all, like looking at like a showrunner
Mhm.
at that level who's hiring you repeatedly, like I think that was good for me. And also I think it helped me too that I like busted out in like this genre space at the beginning, because it gave me a little bit of a, I don't know, like a bigger toolbox. So then if people
Right.
were thinking about me for other stuff, it like Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, who I went and did Riverdale for, that was sort of my first
Mhm.
show outside of Ryan World. He liked, he felt good about hiring me because he knew Ryan had hired me. So, but yeah, it was really helpful to have that program in particular did sort of help me move forward, which was great. And then also, my agents, which, is a whole other conversation podcast, I'm sure, like my
Mhm.
team who I got with early was really thoughtful about sort of where they were positioning me in TV in the beginning, and didn't just sort of like dump me into any show. We were really kind of thoughtful about where I went when. So I think that helped too.
Can you share like what like if there is a in a nutshell version what that strategy was?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is like camps, right? Like there's like camp, like the
Yeah.
Ryan Murphy camp, but I didn't want to stay in that camp. So then I moved into Roberto Aguirre Sacasa's camp. But then there was
Mhm.
like a project at UCP with a producing team that I liked. But I did for Lauren LaFranc, who's Penguin, her first show, Impulse. And then those same producers brought me on to do another. So a lot of it was like connecting dots with great teams that I could like do one thing for, have a meaningful, relationship there, and then move through to do something bigger with them. And then looking
Right.
a little bit for me at like not only YA, also, I have done some comedy, which is crazy because I feel like I only do drama now, but I did do, cable comedy, and, I think just not getting stuck in one thing was helpful. And
Yeah.
then
That's super smart.
yeah. And then I personally like really wanted to start doing pilots, and like I'm a big believer in like say the thing that you want, and I started talking about it early and saying like I see it, I like episodic, I'm happy to be in episodic, but I was like I don't want to only do episodic, and I want to try to move into pilots. And it was
Right.
again from like a relationship that was pre-existing, like that was how I got into that first pilot opportunity.
And what was that?
So that was Katie Keene, which was a spinoff of Riverdale based on another
Mhm.
Archie comic that unfortunately only went for one season, but it did go. So that was great. And that was my first pilot. And that was at Warner Brothers. And I had done a lot of shows at Warner Brothers right around that time. And after that pilot, I went into a deal at Warner Brothers. So I stayed at Warner Brothers for 4 years in a deal as a director and a producer. So
Does that mean they're like, okay, anything, like as projects move through their pipeline, they're saying, okay, let's see if Maggie's interested, or Maggie, you got to do this. Like how much of it is that? And then also like, can you do things for other networks, or is it an exclusive kind of arrangement?
yeah, all great questions. Clearly, you know what you're talking about. Yes, I was not assignable. So it is the version of what you're saying of like, hey, do you want to do this? So there were some things I said no to, primarily because I really wanted to keep the focus on pilot. There were fewer and fewer of those as we went, and there weren't a lot of, Lee Toland Krieger obviously is a friend and a mentor of mine, and he is like the OG pilot guy, and David Nutter. There were like some like major forces there for things, which is great, So sometimes I would come in and do like the first block of a second season of something. But yeah, I think, and yes, it was always a conversation. Like I left to do the first season of Dr. Death. And then I did pause my deal to do Sports Story also. But yeah, it's a great thing. I was able to develop something too. And for me, it was a really wonderful place to be for the time that I was there. But like anything, you're always like, oh, I wish I could do that show, or, oh,
Right.
it's all the things. But it was great for me at the time. I'm happy that I did it.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. I mean, just as a director, it's the same goal for me. Like I've had the deals that get right up to, the 1 yard line, since we're talking about Aaron Hernandez story. And then
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the leadership changes and now they're going in a different
yeah,
direction or
yeah,
whatever. So like pilots have been big on my kind of target
yeah.
for like 2-3 years at this point.
I mean, I feel like, yeah. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You're like, yeah. But also, it's like you want
Mm.
it to be the right one, and you want it to be a good experience too. I
Right.
mean, they're
And
really hard.
I shouldn't transition from this moment without saying I'm doing episode 9 of a show for which you did the pilot.
Oh, which one are you doing? Grosse Pointe?
Yeah, I'm doing 109.
Oh, that's amazing! I didn't know that. That's so great. I mean, I knew you were on the wish list, but oh, that's so
Yeah.
great.
So at
Oh, that
another
makes me
point,
really happy.
I'll pick your brain, to
Yeah.
find out what I need to know.
Oh, they're
But
so lucky to
Asia,
have you. That's great.
and the pilot is great. I just watched. I don't know what. I didn't take note of what stage the cut was, but it's great. I'd read the script, gosh, a while back, so it was nice to
Yeah.
kind of have some distance from the script and watch it
Yeah.
as its own thing, and super well executed. Like it's one of those shows
Oh,
like you're
thank
looking
you.
at like I think this will stick around.
I
And
hope
you've got
so.
so many
I
great actors
really
in it too.
love that experience. I love that cast. I love Asia. I listened to her on your podcast. Yeah, she's incredible.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Mike Coulter from Marvel's Luke Cage and Paramount's Evil. You're watching Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman.
Transitions, A Director's Journey and Motivational Handbook is Pete Chapman's book from Michael Weezy Productions. The reviews are in. Greg Berlanti says, "There's a reason why everyone who works with Pete falls in love with his work. The lessons he imparts here are invaluable. Do yourself a favor and read it cover to cover." From Sarah Gamble, Pete's sharing gold nuggets that will spare you a ton of wasted time and help you channel your drive, talent, and ambition in the most productive way. And from Jesse Williams, this business has everything to do with preparation and expectations. Transitions grounds lessons in reality while empowering our artistry to run free. Not an easy balance to execute. Transitions, A Director's Journey and Motivational Handbook is available on Amazon and anywhere else you get your books. Don't forget about your mom and pop shops, people.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is sponsored by the good folks at Scriptation. Scriptation is the Emmy Award-winning app for production that allows you to mark up scripts, transfer notes, generate breakdowns, and so much more. Personally, I use Scriptation daily on every production that I am involved with. While directing episode 106 of NCIS Origins, I took advantage of Scriptation's photo feature to organize my blocking for the episode's main set piece. We turned a restaurant with one entry point into a multi-level club with private rooms and back alleys, and sharing the photos in my script helped my department heads bring it to life. This is just one of the ways I use the incredible features inside of Scriptation. Go to scriptation.com/Pete to get an exclusive 20% off Scriptation's premium toolkit, Scriptation Industry Pro.
Can we, I guess, I never know where these interviews are going to go, but since we're
Yeah.
here, what was the process of like getting that one, and what number pilot was that for you in this journey?
I mean, everything is so relationship driven, really, for me in
Hmm.
my career. Even, uh, uh, the, I think Grosse Pointe is like my seventh pilot or, depending, like I've done four broadcast pilots. One was never completed because it was during COVID. So like traditional pilots were like you do the one and then they, go or don't go. And then I've done three or four block ones of like limited series. So a good amount. And Grosse Pointe, I have a relationship with that student. I've done a couple shows for UCP. I've never done a proper Universal before, but there is some
Hmm.
crossover there. But the big thing about Grosse Pointe is that Alex Cunningham, who you did Fatal Attraction for, she
Nice.
I did Dirty John for her, the second season of Dirty John. I did the pilot of that. I did the opening block and a couple of more episodes of that. So sorry, this is like such a long-winded answer. She is
This is like the
she's
kind of
friends
thing
with the with
I love to hear.
so Janet Vans and Bill Krebs, who are Grosse Pointe Garden Society, it's
Hmm.
it's their show. It's their
Right.
show. And so yeah, they were looking for directors and my name came up and they talked about me. And then I just went in the room and met with them. I also like when I read that pilot, I could see the pilot. Like I
Yeah.
knew, and it also just felt like for my sensibility, like felt like a good fit. And it happened really quickly. And I went and I met with them in person, which was another thing. I'm sure you have this too. Everyone is always happy to meet on Zoom. I asked to
Right.
meet in person. I think that
Right.
made a difference for them. I went in, I had like a very fast pitch deck on my iPad that I just like scrolled through. But like on any pilot, and I feel like I've heard you talk about this on this podcast. It's like the same thing as like pitching for a feature. Like you're a little bit in the Wild West, right? You're going in, you're like, this is how I see the show. I have no idea if they're gonna see
Right.
the same show.
Right. Right.
Hopefully they like know your work, they know your aesthetic. They're bringing you in because they think you have a vision for it that they will like, but I had a really specific idea of what I wanted it to look like and how I wanted to move the camera and what my like touchstones were for it. And they were like, yeah, we aligned in the meeting. So it felt like a good match. But that's you only want to get the job if that's the
If it's a good
situation,
match.
right?
Right.
Because
Because
otherwise,
and can you speak to, since we've kind of had that conversation earlier about like the challenges of interpreting as a guest director, and perhaps it falling upon deaf ears or ears that prefer something not what you've interpreted, like
right.
what's the difference in that collaboration when you're directing the pilot?
I mean, I bring like so many ideas right away and then I guess if there's anything that they don't get or don't like or they're nervous about, I always want to know right at the beginning. Like, I
Hmm.
think one of the things in my deck, I had images from a lot of like period stuff. Like there was something
Mm.
about the Grosse Pointe Garden of it all that I had some images from like Mad Men and like Amelie or like, things. And I remember it was part of the conversation, like when you're preparing to do the studio network show and tell, which is like the biggest version of your pitch where you show all the executives like what the show is going to look and feel like. And that was a time where they said, oh, like these images, we know what you mean, but like someone else might look at this and think you're going to dress everyone in period
Mhm.
frocks, so
Yeah, yeah.
just like pulling stuff back. And then yeah, again, like I do sort of over communicate a lot where I say like, hey, I'm going to use we're going to carry this little crane. There's like this mini crane that they have in Atlanta that you
Right.
can like, which you'll meet the incredible camera team there. Like we like wheel it in and out of every room, but it's in everything. So there's
Right.
movement in every scene. So I say in the beginning, like, this is something I'm planning, and oh, this is the way I'm thinking about transitions. This is why I'm thinking, just so that they are on board and excited, you know. And I try to be
Yeah.
really clear, you know, even if I'm not clear, I try to make it as clear as possible so everybody is on the same page.
Clarity is an amazing concept.
Yeah.
It's a very challenging one, because I marvel over sometimes how a word choice can send a conversation spiraling. Like you could say, "Oh, I think they're like, looking out the window," and then the writers make it, "Wait, but why?" It's like, no, they're just lost in thought, like looking out the window. It's no big deal. Like, but
Right.
like it
Right.
begins to like create this whole thing. And I find like I'm often like, what is the least emotionally charged word
Mm.
for what I'm trying to say? At least when talking to writers in an interesting way. But then what's the most emotionally charged word that I can say when talking to an actor? So
Yeah.
I'm
Good
I was
point.
going to ask you, like, as an actor, or unless you claim former actor, I don't know. Like, how do you bring that into your direction, into your job as a director, like this experience you have as an actor?
I mean, to me, it really is my most favorite part, because I think it's the thing that I'm the least afraid of. Like, even from my very
Mm,
first movie where I had, Alice and Janney like sitting in front of me, and I thought, oh my God, what am I ever going to say to Alice and Janney that she doesn't already know? But like, there's something about like having been an actor for all those years and been around actors that like I do feel comfortable in those conversations. So I think I love getting inside someone's process too, because as you know, like everyone is so different. Some people really want to be directed a lot. Some people kind of don't. Some people just, they're like, tell me where to stand. Some people are like, I got to do it, which is why
right,
it's so important in our community of directors to like, hopefully you'll talk to whoever is directing all the episodes before you get there, and they can tell you like,
right,
this person, don't walk in and tell him where to sit, or like, oh, he's great, or oh, he loves props, or she
right.
really wants give her an adjustment after everything. It's like, yeah, I don't I do try to give like active language when
Mhm,
I'm directing people, and not like blurry result
mhm.
driven things. I'll try to give like a technical adjustment, or like get down into the words if that's helpful. But it really depends. And then sometimes I have to remind myself to direct people, because sometimes they're so good, I feel like I don't need to do anything, but then they need something. They need to feel like you're in it with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, that's a challenging part of TV, because there's often like good enough, you know, and a lot of times good enough airs throughout the season,
Hmm.
and trying to find a way to, you know, bring something to it that doesn't feel superfluous, and
Hmm.
doesn't feel like a
Hmm.
judgment on what's been good enough. Because sometimes it's like, well, why are you
Hmm.
pushing me past what we clearly do all the time? Thing. What's your if you had to give me tips on how to work with actors, like what would you say? Because the way how you said that's like kind of like your place where you're most comfortable. Like I do it all the time. I kind of default to, you know, I mean, my process is, look, I say outright, I'm probably not gonna have much to say to you for like one or two takes, because I'm just gonna be watching
Hmm.
you and trying to
Hmm.
like divorce myself from whatever I thought I was gonna see and
Hmm.
and
That's
receive
good.
it. But like then when you get in there, like It's just sometimes I've definitely come across actors where I'm like, I just don't know what the fuck to say. Like I
Yeah.
say this and it doesn't work. I say,
Yeah.
I go Freudian and metaphorically and psychologically, and that doesn't
Yeah.
work. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes I find myself kind of drifting in the wind. And oftentimes too, like sometimes there's like literally no word for what I'm asking for. You know what I mean? Like sometimes like
Mhm.
in the beauty of like an actor doing take one, take two, take three without a note, sometimes what I am thinking about happens, but there wasn't, and as far as my limited abilities, there was no word that I knew how to get what you just did.
Right. Right.
So like, unless I got into the minutia of the moment, and I don't want to do that. Like,
Yeah.
unless it's take three or four and you've had enough swings at it where I might say, hey, at this moment, at this transition, what about this?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyhow, I asked the question and I have not stopped talking.
No, it's such a good question. I mean, something I only because I also think first of all, you have to move so fast, right? So if things are
Hmm.
working, you're usually like, okay, I got it. But what I've been trying to do lately, which I think is really working, is when I know I'm done, when I know I'm like, I have it, I will go again. And I
Yeah.
will go and sort of say, like, I hate using this, but I'll kind of say free choice. I'll kind of say, like, let's just get
Right.
another one. And so often that is the
Hmm.
best take. And
Hmm.
and like you're saying, they're doing something and I haven't even really given them anything to do differently. I've just like
Right.
provided enough of an environment where now they feel like they can do something else. I also like never say anything like definitively. I'm not like, do it like
Mm.
this. I'm always like
Right.
figuring it out, genuinely figuring it out as I'm talking to them, like,
Right.
I don't know, what if, like, and then it's more like we're all having an organic, like, experience in the moment. But because I came from acting too, I am, like, very nurturing and, like, I just try to put myself into it with them as much as possible, I'm not, like, out here looking back in, and it's just kind of who I am. I don't really know how to do it any other way,
Hmm.
but yeah, and I think something that not everybody always tells you is that, like, it is your most important job, like, to make sure that those actors feel a connection to you, they feel supported, and that you're getting them to do their very best work, and it can be really hard sometimes on a day player or and if you can't get the performance that you have to like figure out another way to cover it or did not redesign it so that you don't end up with something really clunky in the cut.
Right. Yeah. How do you, like, if you're in a time crunch, maybe actually time crunch or not, because that's just that's another level of the actual question. How do you deal with the actor who kind of never thinks they've nailed it
Mhm.
and seems to want to always continue, but you just don't have time, A, or B, you got what you were looking for and it's great.
Yeah, that happened to me on my second episode of TV at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I remember I didn't know what to do. And he just kept like going again and going again, going again and going again. And I really couldn't get us out of it. It was hard. It was hard. But I mean, I think you have to let them go a little bit. You have to. And then you have to look them in the eyes and say, you got to trust me on this. Like, we definitely have it. And I'm sure you've had that experience too, where someone is like looking at you and they're like, do you have it? Are
Hmm.
you sure you have it? Are you? And yeah, the time crunch thing is, it's like you're playing the game a little bit like we have all the time in the world always, because you don't want people to feel rushed.
Right.
But
Right.
sometimes I'll say like, hey, just so like I'm like up against it and I'm coming from here and I need you to I need you to like do-si-do and end up here coming back. And most
Right.
everybody for the most part, like they get it. The people who are annoying about that are like, have other things that make them hard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I
So,
think
all
you
right,
have to be a little honest sometimes.
there's a project you're working on, but what's your most recently aired episode at the time of our conversation right now in November 24th?
I did an episode of Dr. Odyssey that just aired this
Okay.
past week. That's on Hulu right now, which was very fun and a very network Ryan Murphy adventure. But I had like Loretta Devine and Fred Melamed and Adrian
Mhm.
Warren, and I had an amazing guest cast as
Wow.
well as the regular cast. So that just aired, and then Brilliant Minds, which is my friend Michael Grossi's show, is
Mhm.
airing on December 2nd. So I don't know when this is coming out, but out. So I have a couple things coming out, and then the Aaron Hernandez is streaming on Hulu right now too, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff kind of out there right now. And then Grosse Pointe premieres on February 23rd.
February 23rd. Okay, cool. So between those three, let's say the Aaron Hernandez story, Dr. Odyssey, and I have a bet. What was the third one?
Brilliant Minds.
Brilliant Minds,
Brilliant
yes.
Minds. Zach Quinto. Yeah.
I asked this question earlier of a director and pick an episode of those three. And the question is, what do you think is the most underappreciated crew position? And I ask you to pick an episode because I found when I was talking about it with the other director, it varied for me based on the episode. So like, for instance, like I mentioned one where I left the set late and then I ended up going back to my car at a time where I saw the big 18-wheeler like loading up like 14 production vehicles to be driven away. And I was like, holy shit. I never saw
Yeah.
that because I just get in the car
Yeah.
and leave, you know?
Yes.
So like,
Crews are amazing. They're just incredible. I think for me, the American Sports Story, Aaron Hernandez, Josh, who plays Aaron, the makeup department on that show, Kayla Dobson is the key on that. And he had these massive sleeves of
oh,
tattoos on
tattoos.
his
Yeah.
fully upper his arms, his chest, his back. David Presto, who was special effects makeup, they recreated all of them. They had to Josh had to come in like 3 hours. I mean, their hours were crazy. They would start at like 3 o'clock in the morning. They had like him on like a
Wow.
pulley system, so he could be asleep in the chair. And he, especially Kayla, I just loved her as a person, but also just like worked her ass off, was just like so dedicated. And it was always be a conversation, right? Of like
Hmm.
the turnaround, and then like if he was in a tank top, or if he's, going back and forth in story time, because he like had more tattoos in episode 6 than he had in episode 5,
Wow.
then he had in episode
Yeah.
2, then he had in episode 9. So, and underappreciated. She was definitely well appreciated, and like we loved her always, and I would work with her again in a heartbeat. But like, I also know that her relationship to Josh, to that number one, was such a huge thing for him and his like comfort. And she was the first person he saw every day and the last person he saw at night. And I
Yeah.
think she
Yeah.
created an environment for him that was really kind of playful and fun. I mean, they were, friends. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that is even in the pilots, when we're hiring people, it's such a big part of the conversation in that position in particular, because that is like the first point of contact for cast and can really like set the tone for their day.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's a great answer.
she's the
Yeah. I mean,
best.
and
Yeah.
as a director watching it, like, I wasn't even thinking about that. And the moment you said it, I was
He
like,
doesn't have
yeah,
any of those tattoos.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. It was
crazy.
a huge amount of work every day. Yeah.
Well, as we round third, as I like to say,
God, I could talk to
what
you
are you,
forever.
this is great. This is director therapy. I tell people all the time. And
Yeah.
then it's director education when I talk to folks that are well, this is education too, but it's a different kind of like intake when you're like, oh, that's what your life is like as an executive,
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
What maybe I'll put this, maybe these weave together, maybe they don't. But I gather that you're pretty deliberate, specific, and strategic about what you want to do with your career. So as far as what you're willing to share, because sometimes that stuff is, personal. You're like, I'm about to redefine the Hollywood or something with this invention. But like, what's your kind of goals moving into 25, and also like, what's your take on the state of the industry?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, this is my first. I've been out of the deal that I was in since March, so I'm still like coming into my own, being like a player out there in the world. So I
Mm,
think, I want to continue to find projects that are meaningful for me as a filmmaker, things that I can really bring something to. I don't know if this is your situation too, but I'm moving so steadily in television, but I am really trying to get back into the feature space. And that,
mm,
I have certain projects that I'm really passionate about, and I'm just trusting that they're gonna happen when they're, meant to. But it's really a goal of mine to be back in the feature chair in 25. And then, mentorship is a big part of who I am, and I give back to, the DGA, and any place I can have a mentor, or help someone move up. I will continue to do that, and I hope that we continue to broaden the landscape of who we're hiring, and who, both as directors and as showrunners and storytellers. I still think there's so much more room at the table, and there's so many incredibly talented young people coming up that I want to
mm.
give a turn to, and support to get there and find their way. So, that's just, I enjoy that part of it so much, because I don't, like you said, it is director therapy, because we don't always get to talk about how we
Right,
figure something out. And, someone might look at me and think, oh, she like figured it all out right from the beginning and like
right,
got going. And no, I called like 400 people and said, what's a Russian arm? Like, what everyone
right.
keeps like, how do I do this thing? So yeah, I think the industry is now, we need art more than ever right now. That's what I keep saying to everyone,
Hmm.
is that this is the moment of staying connected to our hearts, and finding the way through. No one can do what we do, so we have to keep doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Agreed, agreed. What three character traits do you think you need to make it in this industry, no matter what you do? Because whether you're an actor, director, editor, I feel like we're probably pulling from the same batch of traits.
Yeah, I think resilience is
Hmm.
a big one for me, 100%. Kindness and heart.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love too that, whenever I ask this question, you say resilience, kindness, and heart. Everyone answers from, I guess, the place where we're assuming talent is a given. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
on top, because the talent is
Yeah.
not enough. It's these
Yeah.
other things. It's the resilience with the
Yeah.
talent. It's the heart while,
Yeah.
pursuing the talent, and they all
Yeah.
kind of bleed into
Yeah.
each other.
Well, you have to like bring your, I guess, kindness and heart, because it's like you can read all the books and like do all the things you're supposed to do, but if you don't bring like who you are forward, like you're not, like, the episode won't be the episode without you
Right.
bringing like yourself to it.
Right.
So there's like no version of it that's successful, I don't think, if you don't bring who you are to it again and
Right.
again.
Yeah, that's so true. I did a show this year, and it was like I walked away from this show saying, this is the last time I will ever leave a scene not getting what I thought I should get
Mm,
from the pressures of whatever coming around you,
mhm.
like, because in the edit I was like, this is fine, but like, I should have got that
Yeah.
other thing, you know?
Yeah, I know.
And that's that's a journey. I'm
And
70.
why do you think why did you do that? Because it was a time thing,
It
or?
was, I mean, now you're going to put me on the couch, Maggie.
Well,
But,
no,
we-
it's like really,
no, it's,
I'm curious.
I had a confrontation with the DP
Mhm.
and I won, but,
Mhm.
but like
Mhm.
I had that
Yeah.
and it was like, I was losing my diplomacy
Mhm. Mhm.
and I just didn't, I knew the scene would be fine. So I don't
Mhm.
I think, you know, but like, I was like, I don't know what my diplomacy reservoir is.
Mhm.
If
Well, that's a really good reason to leave it. I like if you were gonna say, "Oh, we were just gonna be over 10 minutes or something," I would be
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah,
come
yeah.
on." But it was it
It
was like
was
to your
like,
character, which is important.
yeah, it was like, I don't know if I'm going to respond the way people who know me are used to me responding
Yeah.
if I get a certain thing back, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then, you know, I watch it and I'm like, the challenge there, the education there is that there should always be more in the diplomacy reservoir.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that and those are
Yeah.
educational things that you learn well into your career, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So
Yeah.
here's the one. I'm taking notes. This is the as we call it, free choice. Is there anything you want to mention, talk about, point out, or whatever that I haven't asked you in our previous takes of this
Oh
interview,
gosh.
or anything you want to
Um,
leave the audience with, or
oh gosh. No, see, I can't think of anything. I mean, I guess one, I do have a very it's really important to me that with all the work I'm doing, and I'm in Toronto now. I've been here for almost for a month and a half almost. Like it is like so important to have your life,
Mhm,
like I have
mhm.
2 kids, I have a husband, I have like, and it's not always easy to like balance it because so much of the episodic road is literally on the road, and these
Yeah,
jobs can be so all consuming. And I think, I don't know, when I was first starting out, especially, it was this big question of like how can you have a family, and how does it, and it comes up a lot. Like people are always seem to be asking about it. And I think I just mention it because I think that it is, you, not to say you can have it all, but you can. I know so many female directors who are mothers, and
mhm,
wonderful mothers. And I think that if you're starting out and you look forward and if you're any young anything and you're like, how will
right,
I ever make a family in the middle of this? Like that part of it, like, contributes to that kindness and heart and resilience. And and of course you need a partner, and you need to really think about it. But it's such a big part of my work, is having that part of my life be so enriching and so important to me. So anyway,
yeah, it can be done.
it can.
It can be done with the same
Yeah,
character traits you need to make it in the industry.
a lot of
Heart, resilient.
resilience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
this has been pretty awesome. Thank you for taking the time to
such a
chat.
pleasure.
And I'll be watching these episodes. Can't wait to see all your shows as they come out.
Yeah, and yours too. Such a fan. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
It's been a pleasure.
What's up, people? This is Pete Chatmon. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter via @PeteChatmon. Follow the pod on IG via @Let'sShootWithPeteChatmon, and hit up our mailbag with questions, suggestions, or hey, donations if you're feeling like it via let'sshootwithpetechapman@gmail.com. And just in case you need to know how to spell it, that's Pete with the last name Chatmon. Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon is produced and edited by the multi-talented cut creator Tristan Nash.
Assistant produced by the young mogul Jada George and features the wonderfully gifted Kelly McCreary as our announcer. It's written by yours truly, but I mostly come up with these questions on the fly, which you've probably noticed. Go ahead and get your podcast swag via PeteChatmon.com and leave a review on iTunes if so inclined. That shit matters. Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon is sponsored by Scriptation. Scriptation makes it easy to go paperless on set, increase your productivity, and save hours of time. Let's Shoot listeners get a special discount on Scriptation Industry Pro. Go to scriptation.com/Pete to learn more.
Thanks for listening, y'all. Tune in next week for our interview with writer, director, actor, poet, and modern-day cowboy, Rafael Casal. Rafa's been in front of the camera in Low Key, Bad Education, and the feature film Blind Spotting. When Blind Spotting was turned into the critically acclaimed Starz television series, he served as showrunner, writer, and hopped behind the camera as director of 5 episodes. It's going to be a great conversation. In the meantime, stay safe, spread love, and keep creating.